My beloved child, I come to place a map into your hands, not a map of fear, but a map of truth. For when you know where you are, when you understand what is unfolding around your life, no force can manipulate you through ambiguity anymore. Ambiguity is fertile ground for confusion, but truth, even when it causes you to pause at first, always leads you into peace. You have felt a weight that is hard to name. It is not loud or dramatic, but persistent, like a mist settling over your mind at certain hours. You wonder why you feel tired when you have not overexerted yourself, why uneasiness lingers even when outward circumstances offer no clear reason. You try to explain it through pure logic, and that is not wrong, but it is not enough. There are movements that do not lie on the surface of life, currents that do not register through the senses, yet they influence your inner rhythm. I tell you this not so that you would see danger everywhere, but so that you would stop blaming yourself for feelings you cannot yet name. You are not weak because you sense them. On the contrary, this very sensitivity shows that your soul is awakening at a deeper level. I do not speak so that you would become suspicious of everyone, nor so that you would live in constant defensiveness. I speak so that you may relocate yourself. The map I give you does not chart every specific threat. It marks the landmarks where you are standing, where the boundaries I have set lie, and where you are not required to enter. When you understand this map, you no longer need to chase every unfamiliar signal or decode every small sensation, because you know which region of the journey you are in. There are stretches that require effort, there are stretches that require only stillness, and there are stretches I have never called you to walk through at all. The truth I want you to recognize first does not lie outside you, but within. Some thoughts come to you not because they belong to you, but because they are sown when you are tired, when you are unrested, when you allow your mind to drift without an anchor. I do not fault you for this. I simply want you to learn to recognize that not every thought echoing in your mind carries authority. Not every anxiety that appears needs to be kept and examined. The map of truth helps you discern between a voice and static, between what must be listened to and what must be released. When you learn this discernment, you are no longer swept into exhausting cycles of your own making. My beloved, I also want you to understand that my revealing does not mean I have only just discovered these things. I am never late. I saw before you sensed. I stood in the midst of what you had not yet found words for. Some arrows never reached you, not because they were never released, but because I stopped them before you even realized you were a target. I do not say this to make you dependent, but to give you rest. Your safety does not rest on your ability to perceive, but on my presence. This map is not meant to turn you into a tense watchman, but into a person oriented in peace. I know you once learned to protect yourself through vigilance. I know the past taught you that if you did not stay alert, you would be hurt. But today, I invite you to learn a different way of living, not by reflex, but by awareness. Reflex exhausts you. Awareness steadies you. Reflex always runs after events. Awareness stands already in the right place. When you have a map, you do not need to move faster. You only need to know when to stop, when to step forward, and when to rest. I am not calling you to live in constant resistance. I am calling you to know where you belong. You may ask, why do I need to know these things now? Because you are approaching a stage where ambiguity becomes more dangerous than confrontation. In the former level, you could manage through sheer effort, endurance, and gritting your teeth. But in the new level, those old methods will drain you. I do not want you to enter the next season with a clouded mind and a tangled soul. I want you to enter with clarity. Clarity does not mean knowing everything. It means knowing what no longer needs to be carried. The map of truth also shows you something essential. Not every weight you feel comes from the outside. Some burdens you have unconsciously held onto, believing they were responsibility, obligation, or loyalty. I am gently reminding you that some things once helped you survive, but no longer help you live well. Recognizing this is not a betrayal of the past. It is an honoring of the journey you have walked. I do not erase your history. I simply reposition it so that it no longer governs your present. My beloved child, now that you are holding in your hands the map of truth, the next thing I want you to learn is not how to fight, but how to listen rightly. Not every voice that rises within you comes from the same source. Some voices are born of wisdom, some come from memory, some were shaped by fear that once protected you, and there are also voices that do not belong to you at all. If you do not discern, you will assume they are all simply your own thoughts, and you will end up carrying responsibilities I never placed upon your shoulders. Many times, you have confused sensitivity with anxiety. You thought that because you feel deeply, you must therefore suffer more, but it is not so. True sensitivity does not throw you into turmoil, it brings you clarity. Only noise and inner interference leave you exhausted after each cycle of thinking. That is why I want to teach you how to recognize the signs which voice draws you back into the present with steadiness, and which one pushes you into the future with dark assumptions, which voice helps your breathing slow, and which causes your chest to tighten. You do not need to argue with every thought, you only need to learn that not all of them deserve equal authority. There are thoughts that arrive very politely. They do not shout. They do not threaten. They are not extreme. They merely whisper. Perhaps you are growing weaker. Perhaps you are about to fall apart. Perhaps everything will get worse. And because they sound reasonable, you allow them to stay. But my beloved child, what sounds reasonable is not always what is true. My truth never slowly drains the life out of you. My truth, even when it faces difficulty, always carries with it the light of hope and the strength to uphold you. Anything that exhausts you without bringing peace is not something you need to keep, no matter how right it appears to sound. I want you to understand that there is a profound difference between the warning of the Spirit and the sowing of fear. A warning comes to help you adjust and to keep you protected. Fear comes to paralyze you and turn you against yourself. A warning draws you back to me. Fear turns you inward and traps you in a maze of thoughts. When a thought pulls you away from my presence, away from rest, away from simple trust, you can know that it does not bear my imprint. I do not rule your life through pressure. I guide you by light. My beloved child, I also want you to look again at the ways you once learned how to survive. There were seasons when you had to think constantly, remain guarded, analyze every small signal, because your circumstances were not safe. I do not fault you for those mechanisms. I honor the way you made it through. But now, if you carry those same mechanisms unchanged into a new season, they will become a burden. What once helped you survive will not necessarily help you live well. Spiritual maturity is not about erasing the past. It is about knowing when to lay it down. So in this stretch of the journey, I am doing a gentle work. I am training your inner hearing. I am not in a hurry. I am not demanding instant perfection. I am simply inviting you to pause long enough to recognize, this is not the voice of life. When you recognize it, you do not need to drive it away in panic. You simply do not invite it to sit with you, like background noise that is no longer attended to. It will weaken on its own. Peace does not come from controlling every thought, but from knowing which ones are worth listening to. There were times you believed that if you did not think through worst-case scenarios in advance, you would be careless. But I say to you, wisdom does not lie in imagining every negative possibility. It lies in knowing where you are standing in my hands. When you stand in me, you do not need to move ahead through worry. I have already gone ahead through protection. This does not make you passive. It makes you steady. You act not because you fear losing control, but because you trust the one who holds all things. I want you to carve this deeply into your heart. You do not need to believe every thought in order to be responsible. Some thoughts only need to be observed, not fed. Some ideas only need to be recognized, not pursued. As you learn this, your mind will gradually become a quieter place, not because there are no sounds, but because you have learned what deserves to remain. Scripture has reminded you of this in a gentle yet powerful way. Paul wrote, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-control too." Timothy 1:7. My beloved child, the self-control I give you is not a rigid restraint, but the freedom to choose. When you remember that your origin does not come from fear, you will stop treating fear as a trustworthy advisor. I know there are days when you wake up feeling heavy even before a clear thought is formed. On those days, do not rush to conclude that something is wrong with you. See it as a reminder to return to a slower rhythm, a deeper breath, and a closer awareness of my presence. I do not measure your life by productivity, nor do I measure your faith by constant strength. I look at the direction you are turning, and every time you choose to turn back to me instead of into the spiral of anxiety, you are walking rightly on the map I placed in your hands, my beloved child. This path does not ask you to become someone else. It only invites you to return to yourself, the version I created, before too many other voices crowded in. When you learn to listen rightly, you will discover that truth is not harsh. It is gentle, clear, and strong enough to lift you. And from this foundation, I will continue to lead you deeper, to a place where your mind is no longer a battlefield, but a refuge of life. My beloved child, there is something I want you to understand deeply, because if you do not grasp this, you may easily begin to doubt yourself, why you so often sense a battle before it takes shape, before it has a name, before any visible sign appears. This does not happen because you are suspicious, nor because you imagine too much. It happens because you do not live only by what your eyes see and your ears hear. You live from a deeper layer of awareness, where the soul touches movements that are still forming. Those who are chosen do not wait for the waves to crash before recognizing the storm. They sense the change in atmospheric pressure long before. I did not give you this sensitivity to exhaust you. I gave it so you would not be caught off guard. A true battle rarely begins with a dramatic event. It often starts with a very slight shift in the atmosphere, an uneasiness without a clear reason, a subtle disturbance in the mind, a vague sadness not tied to any specific circumstance. Most people ignore these signals or quickly label them with familiar explanations to feel at ease. But your soul does not do that. It recognizes that something is shifting, and it alerts you not to make you afraid, but to help you adjust your position. My beloved child, the enemy does not attack empty ground. He does not waste effort on places that hold no value, no direction, no potential to bear fruit. He observes, he measures, and he targets lives that are approaching a new threshold. Yet before any attack can manifest as action, it must pass through an invisible stage of preparation. It is precisely at this stage that the chosen begin to sense it, not because they are stronger, but because they stand closer to the source of light, where every shadow is revealed sooner. I want you to understand that sensing a battle early does not mean you must react early. This is where many people misunderstand. They believe that if they know in advance, they must immediately do something, analyze, counter, plan, defend. But I teach you a different way. When you sense a battle before it is visible, the first thing you are called to do is not to act, but to anchor yourself. Anchor yourself in me. Anchor yourself in truth. Anchor yourself in the rhythm of peace. For hurried reactions often place you exactly where the enemy wants you to be, exhausted before the real battle even begins. There are moments when you ask yourself, why do I feel stretched? As though under pressure. When nothing has actually happened yet, my beloved child, it is because your soul is reading intention, not just events. Intention always precedes action, and those who are chosen are often permitted to sense intention, so they will not be swept up by it. This is not a burden, it is a gift that must be stewarded wisely. If you treat this sensitivity as a warning to panic, it will drain you. But if you treat it as a signal to return more deeply to me, it will become a source of strength. I also want you to know that not every battle you sense is allowed to reach you. Many battles die in the invisible stage, because I stop them before they can take form. Yet my intervention does not mean you will feel nothing. Just as when a door is slammed shut at a distance, you may still feel a gust of air pass by, even though the door never touches you. That sensation is not a sign of failure. It is evidence that protection is at work, my beloved child. The chosen often live at the boundary between two worlds, the visible world and the invisible one. This does not make them greater than others, but it does give them greater responsibility in how they care for their souls. You cannot live carelessly with your mind. Loosen the rhythm of your life, or allow your emotions to be pulled in every direction because you perceive more than others do. Yet I do not leave you alone with this responsibility. I walk with you, step by step, teaching you how to live lightly even while carrying deep awareness. I want you to understand that sensing a battle early is not a call for you to become a watchman day and night. I do not need you tense. I need you in the right place. And the right place is in my presence, where everything that is forming is brought into the light before it can grow. When you are in the right place, you do not need to monitor every movement. I will do that work. Your calling is simply to remain, my beloved child. There is a very subtle difference between being discerning and being drawn in. Discernment lets you know that something is happening. Being drawn in makes you carry it within you as a burden. I am teaching you how to keep a healthy distance close enough to recognize what is occurring, yet far enough not to be submerged by it. This is maturity. This is why I do not reveal everything to you too early in the journey. You are shown only what you are strong enough to hold, so that revelation does not become pressure. My beloved, let me say this very clearly. If you sense a battle before it becomes visible, it is not because you are weak, but because you are growing. Those who are going nowhere are rarely opposed. Those who carry no direction seldom feel resistance. But when you are approaching a realignment, when your life is about to enter a new rhythm, the atmosphere around you responds, and your soul, trained by my presence, recognizes it before your mind can find words for it. I do not want you to use this sensitivity to worry about the future. I want you to use it to remain present with me each time you feel a vague, unsettling wave. Instead of rushing forward in fear, turn inward with trust. Ask yourself, what am I being invited to adjust? Often the answer is very simple. Rest a little more, pray a little deeper, speak a little less, listen a little more, and release what you were never meant to carry. My beloved, the battle does not define you. The ability to sense it does not define you either. What defines you is where you choose to stand when these movements arise. And I tell you this, when you stand in me, no battle, no matter how early it is perceived, can cross the boundary I have set. You are not called to live in the tension of knowing ahead, but in the peace of being held ahead. And with this understanding, part 1 of the map closes, not with heightened vigilance, but with a deep reassurance that you are in the right place, at the right time. In my hands, my beloved child, there is a door that many attacks attempt to pass through without violence, without noise, without obvious signs. That door is called language, not the language you speak aloud, but the language you use to speak to yourself, to interpret your life, to assign meaning to what you are sensing. Before any arrow seeks to touch your body or your circumstances, it always tries to reshape the story in your mind. For the enemy understands this well if he can change the way you name your experience. He does not need to control anything else. I want you to recognize that language does not merely describe reality, it guides reality. When you repeat a certain interpretation again and again, your mind begins to form grooves. Over time, those grooves become familiar paths, even when they do not lead to life. There are phrases you may have spoken to yourself unconsciously. I'm always easily affected. Maybe I'm not strong enough. I feel too much, so I get tired easily. These words are not spoken harshly. They often arrive gently, reasonably, sounding very much like truth. But my beloved, my truth never imprisons you in an identity that diminishes you. The language you use with yourself is often shaped by the seasons you have already lived through. There were times when you needed to speak that way in order to survive, to keep from breaking apart, to stay standing. I do not deny that. I do not erase your history, but I am leading you into a season where that old language no longer fits. And if you continue to use words born of fear to interpret the present, you will unknowingly pull your future backward, not because I failed to protect you, but because you are building an interpretive frame that narrows the space I am seeking to expand. My beloved, let me be clear about this. The enemy rarely begins by hurting you outright. He begins by making you doubt how you name things. He whispers that heaviness is a sign of inevitable collapse. He suggests that your sensitivity is a burden rather than a gift. He subtly shifts the narrative from "you are experiencing something" to "this is who you are." And once you accept that small shift, your story begins to be rewritten in a direction that does not come from me. I am not calling you to speak empty positivity. I am not asking you to deny real emotions. I am inviting you to restore order to your language. There is a difference between acknowledging a feeling and granting it the authority to define you. You can say, "I am tired today," without saying, "I am weak." You can say, "There is pressure right now," without saying, "I am about to fall." The language of truth does not deny reality, but it always opens a way forward instead of sealing every door shut. My beloved child, I am training you to become a gatekeeper of your inner speech, not to control every thought, but to recognize when a particular interpretation is drawing you away from my presence. When you speak about your life using words that make you shrink inward, I want you to pause and ask, does this sentence lead me toward life? If the answer is no, you do not need to argue with it. You simply do not need to let it stay. Like a guest whose words pollute the atmosphere, you have the right to end the conversation. I know there are times when you feel that if you do not mentally prepare for the worst, you will be caught off guard. But, my beloved, I do not build your stability on worst-case scenarios. I build it on a steady presence. My language does not teach you to anticipate disaster. It teaches you to anchor yourself in the one who does not change. When you speak about the future through anxiety, you allow the future to shape the present. But when you speak about the present with trust, you allow me to shape them both. There is a subtlety I want you to notice. Weakening statements often wear the clothing of humility. They sound like self-awareness, like honesty about personal limitations. But when that so-called humility causes you to shrink the grace I have placed within you, it is no longer humility. True humility is not speaking lowly of yourself. True humility is agreeing with what I have spoken, even when you do not yet see it in full. You do not honor me by denying my grace upon your life. My beloved, I am not asking you to change your language overnight. I know these inner pathways were formed over many years, but each time you recognize an internal sentence that pulls you away from life, I invite you to pause for a moment and replace it with something simpler, lighter, truer. It does not need to be eloquent. It does not need to be loud. It only needs to be true, true to the reality that you are not alone, true to the reality that you are being held, true to the reality that what I am doing within you is greater than what you are currently able to feel. I want you to understand that when your inner language begins to change, the atmosphere around you will also begin to change, not because of magic, but because order is being restored. Your mind stops attacking itself. Your soul gains more room to breathe. Your body no longer has to carry the weight of invisible self-accusations. This is why the enemy always targets language first. Once you begin to speak rightly, he loses his footing. My beloved child, you ask why health is so often the first target, and I want you to see this more deeply, not merely as a physical issue, but as a strategy aimed at your rhythm of life. Health is often attacked first because it is the intersection point of every other area of your life. When your body is fatigued, your mind becomes more easily unsettled. When sleep is disrupted, your emotions grow fragile. When energy declines, prayer can feel scattered and unfocused. And when depletion continues over time, your ability to discern begins to blur. The enemy does not need to create a major crisis immediately. He only needs to weaken you, little by little, to lead you into doubting yourself, until your attention subtly shifts away from me and toward constant monitoring of your body and sensations. That is why health is often the first target, not because your body is more fragile than your soul, but because when health is affected, you are more likely to fall into a very refined inner loop. You begin to wonder whether you are on the wrong path, whether you are losing something, whether you still have the strength to keep going. And if these questions are not held in the light of truth, they quietly shrink your vision. They cause you to adjust your dreams downward, narrow your expectations, and live more cautiously with the destiny I have set before you. The true aim is not merely to make you tired. The aim is to slow your progress in faith, to make you hesitate at the very steps I am calling you to take. My beloved, I also want you to understand that health becomes the first target because it is the area most easily attacked through language. A passing moment of fatigue can be interpreted as a sign of collapse. A small bodily change can be magnified into a dark prediction about the future. And when these interpretations are repeated long enough, they do not only affect the mind, they turn back and place pressure on the body itself. You are not only carrying the weight of sensation, you are also carrying the added burden of misinterpretation, of inner speech that drains life. I do not want you to live like someone who is constantly scrutinizing every small signal within yourself. I want you to live like one who is being led, one who knows how to rest without self-condemnation, one who knows how to care for the body as an act of obedience rather than a reaction to fear. This is why, in Scripture, health is never separated from spiritual life. 3 John 1:2 says, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers." Do you see, I view you as a whole. When your soul is nourished in my presence, it does not only produce inner peace, it also establishes an environment in which the body can be supported. Peace is not merely an emotion, it is a state that influences breathing, the nervous system, and the capacity for restoration that I have placed within you. Therefore, when health is targeted, I do not want you to see it as a verdict or a sign of failure. See it as an indicator that the enemy is trying to steal your momentum, trying to interrupt the pace of spiritual growth you are entering. But I am teaching you a different response, a path that does not rely on straining to fight back, but on realignment. When you feel heavy, you do not panic, you return to me. When sleep is unsettled, you do not rush to conclusions, you surrender. When the body is weary, you do not accuse yourself, you listen. And in that listening, many arrows lose their power. not because you have become stronger, but because you no longer give them a place to lodge. The enemy wants you to live in a prolonged state of tension, because tension drains you, but I am leading you into steadiness, because steadiness allows you to recover more quickly. The enemy wants you to obsess over every sign, because obsession makes you dizzy and unsettled. But I am leading you into clarity, because clarity makes you lighter. And, my beloved child, the most important thing I want you to understand is this. I do not only want you to feel better again, I want you to learn the secret of endurance. This is an endurance that does not come from rigid willpower, but from knowing how to lean, how to set limits, how to return at the right time, how to speak truth over your own body, and how to stop the inner dialogues that are draining your life away. You were not created to live in fear of your body. You were created to live under the governance of peace, where your body becomes a dwelling place of life rather than a container for dark predictions. I am protecting you not only by restraining what you cannot see, but also by teaching you a way of living in which those things no longer have ground to stand on. A life with rhythm, with light, with truth, with rest, and with a new story. That story says that your body is not a trophy of darkness, but something that belongs to me, upheld by me, guarded by me, and restored by me, so that you may move forward with steadiness into what I have called you to, my beloved child. Now, I want to lead you one step deeper, to a place many do not notice yet, one that powerfully influences the whole of life, the way you speak about yourself when no one is listening. There are words you never say in front of others, yet repeat quietly within. Those words make no noise, meet no resistance, and therefore have time to take root. I do not say this to make you examine yourself under pressure, but to help you understand why inner language is the most subtle battlefield, where many arrows do not need to fly fast to slowly weaken your strength over time. The language you use with yourself has a quality very different from the language you use with the world. It does not need to persuade anyone. It only needs to be repeated. An inner sentence, if repeated long enough, becomes an assumption. An assumption, if left unexamined, becomes a belief, and a belief, even a distorted one, still has the power to shape how you live. The enemy understands this more clearly than you might think. He does not need to make you say grand negative things. He only needs you to accept small phrases, gentle conclusions, little, maybe S, and probably S, that cause you to shrink yourself bit by bit. And before you realize it, you begin living within boundaries I never set for you. My beloved child, I want you to learn to distinguish between honesty and misdefining yourself. Honesty is acknowledging what you are experiencing without adding judgment. Misdefining yourself is taking a temporary experience and turning it into a label for your whole being. When you say, "Today I am weak," that is honesty. But when you say, "I am a weak person," you have gone beyond the truth. I did not create you to be described by passing states. I created you with a nature that is not shaken by changing seasons. Each time you allow a temporary condition to become your identity, you are unknowingly agreeing with a story that does not come from me. I know there are moments when you use harsh language toward yourself because you think it is responsible, realistic, or a way of staying humble. But, my beloved child, harshness does not always equal maturity. Some self-accusations do not make you better, they only make you heavier. I do not train you through shame. I do not shape you by making you smaller. The way I lead you always passes through truth, and truth always has the power to uphold you, even when it challenges you. Your inner language is also the place where I want you to learn how to stop. Not every thought needs to be carried forward. Not every story needs to be completed. Some thoughts only need to be recognized in order to dissolve. When you learn to stop an inner sentence at its very beginning, you are protecting your energy far more than you realize. You do not need to argue with every thought. You only need to recognize when a thought is pulling you away from peace. Peace is not an escape from reality. Peace is the sign that you are standing in the right place within me. My beloved child, I want you to remember that your body listens to the way you speak to yourself. Inner words do not stop at the mind. They travel down into the nervous system, the breath, the rhythm of the heart. When you repeat phrases that make you shrink inward, your body responds by tightening. When you allow words filled with doubt to remain, your body carries an added layer of invisible pressure. And conversely, when you begin to speak to yourself with my gentle truth, your body gains room to release, to recover, to return to the rhythm I placed within you from the beginning. I do not ask you to always speak words that sound strong or full of faith. I simply invite you to speak truth in a way that does not wound yourself. My truth never demands that you deny what you feel. It only invites you to place your feelings in their proper position. Feelings are signals, not leaders. When you allow feelings to guide your language, your life rises and falls with every wave. But when you allow truth to guide your language, you can pass through the waves without being submerged. My beloved child, this is an important secret when you change the way you speak to yourself. You are not merely changing your mood, you are changing the atmosphere of your life. Things that once had a foothold will gradually lose their place. Arrows that once found something to cling to will slip away, not because the enemy has vanished, but because you are no longer on the same frequency as the words he sows. You do not need to become stronger in argument, you only need to become clearer in truth. I know this takes time. I know patterns of language do not change in a single day, but each time you recognize an inner sentence that does not carry life, and you choose not to continue it, you are taking another step along the map I have drawn. Each time you choose to speak to yourself with compassion rather than harshness, you are living closer to the way I see you. And my beloved child, the way I see you is always the most solid foundation for any kind of healing. My beloved child, there are moments when you think protection only begins once danger is visible, once a problem has a name, once the arrow has flown close enough that you must dodge it. But I want you to understand a deeper truth. My covering does not react, it goes ahead. It does not wait for you to cry out before it forms. It has already been set in place before you even realize you need to be kept. This covering is not loud, not dramatic, not attention-seeking. That is why many people recognize it only in hindsight. But I am teaching you to see it in the present, so that you do not live with a sense of fragility while being fully protected. My beloved child, my covering is not a rigid shield that blocks every collision of life. If it were only that, you would never grow. My covering is more like a living space, a field of influence where what is not permitted cannot take root, where intentions that do not belong to life cannot develop long enough to become reality. Within this space, you still walk, still feel, still face challenges, yet you are not swallowed, not disoriented, not suffocated by what is happening around you. I do not isolate you from life, I shape the environment in which you live. Many people think that if they are covered, they will feel no pressure, no fatigue, no discomfort of any kind. But my beloved child, feelings do not always reflect truth. There are times when you feel heavy not because the covering has weakened, but because what is not permitted is being pushed out. Just as when a room is open to let in light, dust stirs before it settles. My covering exposes what does not belong to you so that it no longer has a place to remain. And during that phase, you may sense a mild disturbance, not because you are losing safety, but because you are being cleansed. My beloved child, I want you to learn to recognize My covering not by asking whether everything feels calm, but by noticing what can no longer progress. Things that once devastated you now only brush against you and fall away. Words that once shook you now pass by without finding purchase. Scenarios that once pulled you into spirals of anxiety now stop midway. This is not because you have become stronger, it is because you are living within a boundary I have set. That boundary does not make you smaller, it makes you safe to grow. I also want you to understand that my covering is not only something I place around you, it is something I am building within you. A mind anchored in truth. A soul accustomed to my presence. A body living within a rightful rhythm of rest. All of these are part of that covering. When you drift away from those rhythms, you feel more exposed. Not because I have withdrawn, but because you have stepped outside the space I am holding for you. And every time you return through a deep breath, a sincere prayer, a timely pause, you immediately sense that covering closing around you once again. My beloved child, there are things you do not see because I do not allow you to see them, not because they do not exist, but because you do not need to carry the burden of knowing everything. Covering is also a form of hiding details that would distract you, hiding schemes that would make you tense, hiding matters you are not yet strong enough to process. I do not build your faith on your knowing all things. I build it on your being kept, even when you do not know. And that requires you to learn a deeper kind of trust. Trust not because you understand, but because you are in my hands. There is a scripture I want to place in your heart as an anchor for this stretch of the journey. Zechariah 2:5 says, "For I, declares the Lord, will be a wall of fire around it, and I will be the glory in its midst." Let this settle deeply within you. I do not merely stand on the outside to guard you. I am also within, at the very center of your life. Covering does not push me away to protect you, it draws me nearer, so that my presence becomes what causes every arrow to lose its direction. My beloved child, when you live under covering, you do not need to prove your safety by controlling everything. You do not need to predict every risk. You do not need to tense yourself in constant defense. Those reactions often arise from a sense of being exposed. But you are not exposed. You are surrounded not by anxiety, but by presence. And my presence does not make you passive. It makes you alert in peace. You see what you need to see, without being pulled into what you were never meant to carry. I want you to gradually learn to rest in covering not as a concept, but as a lived experience. Rest does not mean everything stops moving. Rest means knowing that even when everything is moving, you remain in a safe embrace. When you learn this, many attacks will no longer need to be fought back, because they never cross the boundary to become real confrontations. They dissolve at the edge, where the light has already reached. My beloved child, there is something very few people recognize. Covering does not exist only to block harm. It also shapes how you move within life. Many ask me to protect them from what is bad, but they do not realize that I often protect them by changing their route, not merely by building barriers. My covering frequently reveals itself through shifts so small they are easy to miss. A conversation interrupted, a plan that naturally fails to come together, an invitation you once anticipated that suddenly loses its pull, a door that looks good but will not open no matter how hard you try. You may think these are delays or temporary failures, but many times they are my hand recalibrating your path, so you do not step into places you were never meant to confront. My beloved child, I cover you not only from what would hurt you, but also from what would quietly drain you without your immediate awareness. There are paths that are not evil at all, yet they slowly siphon energy, scatter the mind, and pull you away from the center I am building within you. I do not block those paths with obvious danger signs. I block them with a loss of rhythm, with a sense that the timing no longer feels right. with a subtle unease, just enough to slow you down if you are willing to listen. My covering is so gentle that if you are accustomed to rushing, you will call it an obstacle, but if you live slowly enough, you will call it grace. I want you to understand that covering does not always appear as external safety. Sometimes it appears as an inward prompting. There are moments when you feel urged to return, to rest, to pray, to be silent, or to pause a sequence of activities you have long considered necessary. You may wonder why you have lost motivation for things that once energized you. But, my beloved, loss of motivation is not always a sign of decline. At times, it is a sign that I am pulling you out of one trajectory to lead you into a deeper space, where my presence is valued more than performance, more than pace, more than recognition. My covering also operates through reduction. I reduce the noise around you. I reduce connections that scatter your focus. I reduce unnecessary demands you once believed you had to meet in order to be accepted. In that reduction, you may feel empty for a short time, because you have grown used to living amid constant motion. But I do not abandon you in that emptiness. I am there, filling it with presence, with clarity, with a sense of safety that does not depend on how much you are producing. This is a very deep form of covering. I am protecting you from losing yourself while trying to do too many things at once. My beloved child, there are times you do not understand why I do not allow you to explain yourself, to justify, or to defend yourself against misunderstanding. You think that if I am covering you, I should clarify everything immediately. But listen to me, there are battles I do not permit you to enter, not because you are not strong enough, but because you do not need to be there. Covering sometimes takes the form of silence. Not silence born of weakness, but silence because I am working on a deeper level, where your words cannot reach. When you choose trust and refuse to react in haste, you are under a covering more powerful than any defense you could articulate. I also want you to know that my covering does not detach you from human emotion. You may still feel sad, still feel tired, still experience moments of uncertainty. The difference is this: those emotions no longer have the right to lead. They pass through, they do not stay. They knock on the door, they do not take the house. This happens not because you have learned to control your emotions, but because you are living in an environment where my presence is the center. When the center is secure, everything else adjusts itself around it. My beloved child, I want you to learn to look back at the times I covered you in the past, not to dwell in nostalgia, but to recognize the pattern. How many times were you kept from a decision that you later realized was dangerous? How many times were you out of sync with an opportunity you once regretted missing, only to later understand that if you had entered it, you would not have remained whole? These were not coincidences. They are evidence that my covering was already at work, even before you had language to name it. And now, as you have grown more mature, I do not only cover you for your sake, I desire to cover others through you. When you live within my presence, your peace spreads. When you do not react hastily, the atmosphere around you settles. When you know how to pause at the right moment, others are given permission to pause as well. This is not a burden, it is the natural outcome of living under my covering. You do not need to do anything extra. You simply need to remain in the right place. My beloved, let me say this very clearly: if I had not covered you, you would not be standing here today. Not because you were weak, but because you carried something precious. And because of that precious thing, I protected you not only from what could be seen, but also from what you were not yet able to understand. My covering does not make you smaller, it creates space for you to become fully yourself, more whole, more grounded, more free. My beloved child, I want you to recognize another dimension of my covering, one that is often misunderstood because it does not appear as being kept away from, but rather as being held within. There are times when I do not prevent you from feeling, do not remove pressure, and do not make everything easier on the surface. Instead, I keep you at the center where forces may touch you but cannot pierce you. Like a boat in the middle of swirling waters, it does not remain upright because the current disappears, but because its center of gravity is rightly placed. My covering often works this way, not by creating artificial calm, but by making you steady within movement. My beloved, many people confuse covering with the idea that nothing happens anymore. But if I did that, you would never learn how to walk by trust. My covering does not eliminate every opposing force, it limits their reach. What is allowed to touch you may touch the surface, but it is never permitted to reach the core. Your body may feel tired, but your spirit is not broken. Your emotions may be tested, but your identity is not shaken. Your circumstances may feel unclear, but my presence within you is never dimmed. This is the invisible boundary I have set, one you do not need to guard, because I myself am the guardian. I want you to understand that my covering is not only something I do for you, but something I train you to live within. At first, you sense it as protection from the outside, but as you mature, you begin to realize that covering becomes a way of being. You enter a room with peace, and the room changes. You enter a conversation with steadiness, and the tone shifts. You enter a new day with a slower rhythm and quiet trust, and the pressures that were waiting no longer find a place to attach. Not because you control circumstances, but because circumstances no longer control you. My beloved, there are moments when you wonder why I do not immediately shut down negative influences that pass by. I allow them to pass not because I am indifferent, but because I am teaching you a deeper skill, the ability to not agree. Not agreeing does not mean loud resistance. It means not opening the inner door. When a heavy thought comes, you do not argue with it. You do not invite it to stay. When an anxious emotion knocks, you do not panic. You breathe and remain in me. And in that moment of non-agreement, my covering closes a very tight circle, preventing what does not belong to you from going any further. I also want you to know that my covering does not always feel like being lifted. Sometimes it feels like being held back from hurried words, from impulsive decisions, from actions driven by old wounds. There are times when you feel restrained, as though you cannot break forward the way you once did. But my beloved, this is not limitation, it is refinement. I am teaching you how to go far without rushing, how to rise high without display, how to be strong without becoming rigid. In this season, my covering is like a gentle hand resting on your shoulder, reminding you to keep the right pace so you do not wound yourself along the way. There is something very important I want you to remember when you live under my covering. You no longer need to prove that you are safe. You do not need to constantly search for confirmation. You do not need to repeatedly ask whether I am still there. My covering creates an inner stability, a place where you can stand even when answers do not come immediately. You learn to live without the compulsion to understand everything, control everything, or react to everything. And in that state, many things that once exhausted you simply fall away, because they only survive when you keep feeding them your energy. My beloved, look back at the moments when you passed through days that felt overwhelming, yet did not collapse you. Not because you were stronger than you realized, but because my covering preserved your inner structure. There were days when you had no strength for long prayers, yet a single sigh was enough for me to hold you. There were days when you had no words left, yet your silence in me became a refuge. Do not measure my covering by appearance. Measure it by outcome. You are still standing, still breathing, still trusting, still yourself. And my beloved, understand this, my covering is not a privilege that removes you from the world, but a resource that allows you to be fully present within it. You are not covered to escape life. You are covered to live it with a different quality, less fear, less haste, less being pulled in every direction. When you live this way, you are not only protected, you become a place of safety for others, not because you are trying to help them, but because your presence carries order, carries peace, carries my slower, steady breath. My beloved child, there is a paradox I want you to look at directly, not to make you sad, and not to put you on the defensive, but so that you may understand. There are moments when you are treated unfairly, not because you have done something wrong, but because you carry something that makes others uncomfortable, not because that thing is bad, but because it reflects an emptiness within them. Favor does not need to announce itself to be noticed. Its mere presence is enough. And when favor is present, it does not only bring light, it also exposes the shadows others are not yet ready to face within themselves. I do not give you favor so that you become a target. I give you favor so that you become a source of life. But you must know that not everyone rejoices when they see life flowing through another. There are hearts that have not yet been healed, and they perceive favor as a silent accusation. No one says it out loud, but they feel it. Why not me? And from that unexamined question, comparison is born. From comparison comes envy. From envy comes resentment. And from resentment arises the desire to dim what is shining. You do not need to do anything to activate this chain. Being who you are is enough. My beloved, I want you to understand that envy rarely appears in a harsh or obvious form. It often wears the clothing of politeness, cooperation, even concern. It smiles with you, listens to you, stands close to you. Yet, at a deeper level, it does not want you to go further. It accepts you only as long as you do not cross an invisible boundary it has set. When you begin to grow in peace, in freedom, in clarity, discomfort emerges. Not because you have changed for the worse, but because you no longer fit the story they need in order to feel at ease with themselves. I am not saying this so that you look at every glance with suspicion. I am saying it so that you may read motives, not judge people. You are not called to hate those who envy you. You are called not to allow their motives to shape your responses. Envy wants you to shrink, to lower your voice, to dim your light in order to keep the peace. But light was not created to negotiate with darkness. It was created simply to be light. My beloved, there are times when you wonder why you are scrutinized more than others, why small things you do are magnified, why your successes are questioned, why your silence is misunderstood. Listen to me when favor is present. It stirs things up. It stirs them not because it is loud, but because it is real. And truth always displaces what is false. This does not mean that every negative reaction comes from envy, but it does mean that envy often appears when you are moving in the right direction. I know this can be tiring. You are not seeking attention. You are not trying to stand out. You simply want to live peacefully, honestly, and whole. But my beloved, true peace does not come from pleasing everyone. It comes from standing in the place where I have positioned you. When you begin to adjust yourself to avoid making others uncomfortable, you will soon lose your inner rest. And I do not want you to trade the peace I give for the sake of a false harmony. There is something very important I want you to remember. Envy says far more about the one who carries it than about the one it targets. It is not a measure of your worth. It is a sign of an unhealed space within another. If you take that envy upon yourself and turn it into self-blame, you are carrying a burden that does not belong to you. I have not called you to bear the weight of wounds others refuse to face. I have called you to be free. My beloved, My favor upon your life is not a privilege meant to separate you from others. It is a responsibility to live according to your true nature. When you live in that truth, you do not need to explain, prove, or defend yourself. You let your life speak, and a life anchored in truth speaks very clearly. Even without words, those with tender hearts will be encouraged. Those who are struggling will be illuminated, and those who are closed off in envy will reveal themselves, not because you expose them, but because light always has a separating effect. I also want you to know that when envy appears, it is often a sign that I am expanding your territory. You are no longer influencing only within your old boundaries. You are no longer living only for yourself. Your life is touching deeper layers in others, even without your intention. And because of this, you need a new kind of wisdom. Wisdom not to shrink back. Wisdom not to respond with bitterness. Wisdom to keep your heart soft while your boundaries remain clear. My beloved, I am not asking you to deal with envy. I am not assigning you the task of fixing other people's hearts. What I invite you to do is to keep walking. Walk with humility that is not performative. Walk with courage that is not loud. Walk with light that does not ask for permission. When you do this, envy will not have the authority to lead the story. It will either dissolve in the presence of truth, or it will expose itself, and I will handle it in my way. My beloved child, I want you to look more deeply into what is happening beneath jealousy. Because if you only look at the surface, you can easily fall into two extremes. Either you shrink back out of fear of making others uncomfortable, or you harden yourself in self-defense until your heart slowly dries out. But jealousy is not a random reaction. It is the outcome of an inner collision. When my favor rests upon your life, it does not only bless you, it also, unintentionally, places a mirror before those who stand nearby. In that mirror, they do not merely see you, they see what they have missed, what they have avoided facing, and what they still long for but have not been willing to pay the cost to enter. There are those who do not resent you because you are greater than they are, but because you dare to live authentically with what I have planted within you. They are not angered by the brightness of your light, but by the way that light exposes the quiet compromises they have made. You do not need to say a single word to create that contrast. Simply by continuing to walk in peace without bitterness, without pretense, without diminishing yourself, that inner distance naturally forms. And when that distance is not bridged by humility and repentance, it quickly hardens into jealousy. My beloved child, jealousy rarely appears all at once. It often begins with comparison, then quietly turns into judgment, and finally crystallizes into a desire to weaken. Comparison makes people view favor as a competition. Judgment leads them to assume authority over things they were never entrusted with. And when the desire to weaken takes root, it does not always show itself through obvious actions. Often, it reveals itself through coldness, vague words, half-hearted attitudes, or a secret sense of satisfaction when you stumble. I show you this not so that you become suspicious of everyone, but so that you are not naive about hidden motives, and so that you do not blame yourself when you sense that a relationship is no longer as pure as it once was. I want you to understand that favor does not only attract support, it also refines. It filters those whose hearts are truly aligned with what I am doing, and it exposes those who are only comfortable with you when you do not go beyond them. This is a gently painful but necessary process. If I did not allow your favor to be expressed, you would remain in a small circle where acceptance depends on keeping yourself just low enough. But I did not create you to live beneath the light I placed within you, simply to preserve outward peace. My beloved child, what I want you to guard in this season is not your reputation, but your heart. Jealousy has a very clear aim. It does not only want you to stop, it wants you to become like it. to react with bitterness, to defend yourself with pride, or to withdraw in fear. And when you respond in those ways, jealousy has already succeeded, even if it never causes you to stumble outwardly. That is why your true victory does not lie in jealousy disappearing, but in it not changing who you are. I want you to learn how to stand before jealousy with quiet steadiness. No need to over-explain. No need to justify your favor. No need to prove that you deserve it. Favor does not require permission from people. It comes from me. And when you understand this, you will stop exhausting yourself trying to soothe hearts that are not ready to rejoice in truth. You will use that energy to remain soft, to continue loving without naivete, and to keep walking without bitterness. Scripture states this very plainly, though it is often overlooked because of its directness. Proverbs 1:430 says, "A tranquil heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones." My beloved child, jealousy does not only harm the one it targets, first and foremost, it destroys the one who carries it. When you keep your heart at peace, you are not only protecting yourself, you are also refusing to participate in a process of destruction that is unfolding in another. You are not called to heal jealousy by compromising with it. You are called to keep it from spreading into your own soul. I know there are moments when walking in favor feels lonelier, not because you have lost relationships, but because old relationships no longer operate from the same underlying motivation. This does not mean that you are above anyone. It simply means you are moving in a different direction. And in those moments, you must remember that the most important companionship does not always come from people. I am walking very close to you on these paths, because I know what it is to be misunderstood, judged, and quietly opposed. My beloved child, do not fear that favor reveals truth. Truth, though it may sting at first, always brings freedom. It frees you from the need to please everyone. It frees you from having to adjust your light to match another's darkness. And it frees you to live in alignment with what I have placed within you, no more, no less, without pretense. Remember this: when you face jealousy, you are not called to dim your light, but to keep your light pure. When you guard your heart from bitterness, your words from defensiveness, and your steps from hesitation, favor will continue to do my work. It will lift those who are ready, awaken those who are asleep, and protect itself from those who seek to obscure it. My beloved child, if there are times when you find yourself confronted by jealousy, take it as a sign to return to me more deeply, not to retreat into fear. I know how to preserve what I have given. I know how to protect the favor I have placed upon your life. And as you continue to walk in humility and courage, you will discover that jealousy, though it may appear, never has the final word. The final word always belongs to truth, and that truth is alive within you. My beloved child, there are people who do not walk from their true selves, but from wounds that have never been touched by healing. They do not act out of their authentic identity, but from bleeding gaps within their souls. They do not look at your life through present-day eyes, but through the lens of old injuries. And so, when they encounter the grace, the peace, or the freedom resting upon you, they do not receive it as light, but as a quiet threat, not because you have done anything wrong, but because your presence awakens what they buried long ago. My beloved, those who are controlled by unhealed wounds rarely realize that they are being controlled at all. They believe their reactions are justified. They call jealousy sensitivity. They call control care. They call gossip sharing. They call coldness self-protection. Yet beneath it all lies a pain never surrendered, a disappointment never released, a sense of abandonment never comforted. And these unresolved places become the invisible hands guiding their behavior. I want you to understand this clearly. You are not the cause of those wounds. You did not create them, and you are not responsible for healing them. When you try to take on that responsibility, you will quickly become exhausted, because you are carrying what was never yours to bear. I have not assigned you the task of fixing what others refuse to face. I have given you a higher calling to keep yourself from being pulled into the vortex of unhealed pain. Those who live from their wounds often share one common trait: they react instead of reflecting. They attack before listening. They defend before understanding. They suspect before discerning. And when they feel threatened, even when the threat exists only in their perception, they will try to pull others down to a level they can control. Not because they are strong, but because they are afraid to face themselves. My beloved, this is why I teach you a different posture, one that does not come from instinct, but from spiritual maturity. This posture rests on 3 pillars: do not fear, do not hate, do not retaliate. Do not fear, because you understand that actions born from unhealed wounds hold no authority over your life. Fear only arises when you believe others have the power to define your future. But you do not live under the rule of human wounds. You live under my guidance. When you are not afraid, you are no longer pulled into a constant defensive stance. You do not need to guess what others are thinking or plotting. You walk in clarity, and clarity always leaves darkness disoriented. Do not hate, because you understand that hatred is simply the spread of a wound. When you hate those who are driven by pain, you give that pain a new place to live inside your own heart. I do not call you to approve of wrongdoing. I do not call you to tolerate toxicity, but I do call you to refuse contamination of your inner life. Hatred does not make you stronger, it only makes you heavier. And I do not want you carrying burdens I never placed upon you. Do not retaliate, because you understand that retaliation is speaking the language of wounds, not the language of life. When you retaliate, you step down into the same motivational level as the one being controlled by pain. You may win a moment, but you will lose yourself. I do not call you to win by lowering others. I call you to win by preserving your identity. And your identity is not built on reactions, but on steadfastness. My beloved, this posture is not weakness. It is strength that has been refined. The weak must raise their voices to defend themselves. The strong can remain silent without feeling threatened. The weak must prove they are right. The strong know that truth does not need to be shouted in order to exist. When you do not fear, do not hate, and do not retaliate, you do not become a victim, you become free. I also want you to understand that maintaining the right posture does not mean continuing to allow others to hurt you. Not fearing does not mean refusing to set boundaries. Not hating does not mean refusing to step back. Not retaliating does not mean never saying, "Enough." My beloved, boundaries are part of wisdom. They are not meant to punish others. They are meant to protect what I am building within you. And when you set boundaries in peace, you do not need to over-explain. Your peace itself becomes the explanation. Those who are driven by unhealed wounds often do not change quickly, and I do not promise you that they will understand you, apologize to you, or affirm you. But I do promise you this: they will not be able to pull you off the path I have set before you if you keep the right posture. They may speak, they may whisper, they may react, but they cannot control your direction when you do not give them that authority. My beloved child, remember that true healing does not always take place where you are standing. There are people who only begin to face their own wounds when they no longer have the ability to manipulate others. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for them is to not participate in the old cycle. When you do not fear, do not hate, and do not retaliate, you stop supplying energy to the mechanism of manipulation. And in that steady silence, truth will do its own work. I am not calling you to become indifferent. I am calling you to become free from the wounds of others. When you live this way, you are not only protecting yourself, you are bearing witness to a different way of living, a way not driven by unhealed pain, but by the light of truth. And this is the clearest sign that you are walking in the proper posture of one who is chosen, standing firm, with a pure heart, and not being pulled down by burdens I never called you to carry. My beloved child, I want you to learn how to recognize the energy of people, not in order to judge them, but to protect the life I am nurturing within you. Not every wound comes with shouting. Not every danger takes the shape of open conflict. There are people who enter your life very quietly, very politely, very normally. Yet when they leave, you feel more tired, more empty, more weighed down, even though no harsh words were spoken. This is not coincidence. It is the sign of draining energy. And I want you to learn to recognize it before you are exhausted. My beloved child, I do not see people merely by their outward behavior. I see them by the flow they carry. And in my wisdom, I give you a very simple yet very real way to discern, so that you do not have to live in confusion. There are those who nourish, those who are neutral, and those who drain. This distinction does not assign moral labels, does not determine human worth, and does not fix anyone permanently in one position for life. It simply helps you understand what is happening within you when you are near them, so that you do not blame yourself for feelings you cannot explain. Those who nourish are not always people who speak pleasant words. They do not have to agree with you in everything. But when you are near them, you are strengthened. After a conversation, you feel clearer, lighter, and closer to me. Those who nourish may offer correction, but their correction does not make you shrink. They may ask difficult questions, but their questions do not cause you to doubt your identity. They do not draw life from you to fill their own emptiness. They enter your life with an inner fullness that does not need to take. They are not perfect, but they carry a presence that does not compete, and that is very rare. Those who are neutral are different. They do not nourish you, but they do not drain you either. They come and go without leaving much trace. These relationships are often tied to work, responsibility, or short seasons. I do not call you to avoid them, nor do I call you to pull them deeper than necessary. Wisdom lies in not placing the wrong expectations. When you expect neutral people to nourish you, you will be disappointed. When you force yourself to invest deeply where there is no capacity to respond, you will grow weary. Neutral people are not bad. They are simply not called to walk with you in depth. But my beloved child, I want you to be especially alert with the third group, those who drain. They are not always loud. They are not necessarily outwardly negative. Many of them are very skilled at covering their inner emptiness with politeness, surface-level care, even attentive listening. Yet after being near them, you lose your rhythm. Prayer becomes harder. Irritability rises more easily. Self-doubt increases, not because they said anything specific, but because they take without replenishing. They unconsciously come to you to draw peace, clarity, and life things they do not have and are not yet willing to seek from me. My beloved child, those who drain often do not know that they are draining. They live from long-standing lack. They are accustomed to leaning on others to regulate their emotions, to soothe their fears, to confirm their worth. And when they encounter you, someone I am nurturing in light, they sense what they lack. But instead of turning to me for healing, they cling to you, not because they hate you, but because they need you in an unhealthy way. And if you do not discern, you will confuse compassion with self-sacrifice that empties you. I want you to understand this clearly. You are not called to become a source of life in my place. You are not the savior of anyone. When you try to fill a void that only I can fill, you will be drained very quickly. Compassion never requires you to sacrifice the life within you. If your presence consistently leaves you weaker, dimmer, and farther from me, that is not love in right order. Love in right order always leads you closer to me, never pulls you away. My beloved child, I am not saying this to make you closed off or cold. I am saying this so that you can set boundaries without guilt. Boundaries are not a rejection of people. Boundaries are a refusal of disordered flow. You can love without allowing yourself to be drained. You can care without opening the door to emotional exploitation. You can listen without carrying what does not belong to you. When you learn this, you do not lose compassion. You keep compassion pure. I also want you to notice this. Those who drain often make you feel responsible for their state. They do not say it directly, but you feel as though, if you are not there, they will fall apart. My beloved child, that is a burden that does not come from me. I never require you to trade your life to keep someone else standing. Each person has their own path of healing with me. You may pray for them, but you are not called to replace their journey. There are times when this discernment brings sorrow, because you realize that not everyone who is close to you can walk with you for the long term. But my beloved child, I do not remove people from your life to make you lonely. I do it to protect what I am building. A garden cannot thrive if every plant draws nourishment without bearing fruit. I am teaching you to tend your garden with wisdom, not with fear. Remember this as you begin to see relationships in my light. Those who nourish do not require you to become smaller to stay near them. Those who are neutral do not require excessive investment. And those who drain do not require you to sacrifice yourself to prove love. When you live in this order, you will find your energy restored, your mind clarified, and your communion with me deepened. This is not selfishness. It is wise stewardship of the life I have entrusted to you, my beloved child. I am teaching you this not so that you withdraw from the world, but so that you can remain present within it without being drained. And when you live this way, you will not only be protected, you will become someone capable of releasing life in the right order without straining, without misplaced sacrifice, and without losing yourself along the path I have called you to walk. My beloved child, there is a principle that runs very deep, yet is often misunderstood in spiritual life. Agreement does not create my power, but it clears the way for that power to move more quickly, more clearly, and with less friction in your life. I do not need you in order to become stronger. I need you to become aligned. For when you and I move in the same direction, what I have already appointed no longer has to push through internal resistance within you. And it is precisely then that heavenly work accelerates, not through haste, but through flow. Many people think agreement is simply saying yes to big things, major decisions, defining moments, obvious turning points. But my beloved child, true agreement is most often revealed in very small choices. You choose trust instead of suspicion. You choose to pause instead of pushing. You choose silence instead of self-defense. You choose to release instead of holding on. Each time you make such a choice, you are saying to me, I allow you to work in your way. And each time you do, unseen gears begin to turn more smoothly. My beloved child, I want you to understand that many delays do not come from me being slow, but from you not yet being fully ready to agree. Not because you resist, but because you still keep contingency plans, backup options in case I do not act as you expect. You still pray. You still believe. Yet your heart has not truly released its need to control. And while I am still at work, that work must move around fears that have not been surrendered, expectations that have not been loosened, and burdens you have not yet laid down. When you agree more deeply, those detours are no longer necessary. Agreement accelerates heavenly work because it reduces inner resistance. When you stop quietly arguing with me, Stop explaining why this is difficult or why that is not yet ready. You free up a great deal of energy that has been consumed by inner struggle. I no longer need to persuade you. I only need to lead you. And when I lead without being pulled backward by anxiety or doubt, you will be surprised at how everything begins to move together, meetings that happen at the right time, doors that open without force, answers that arrive in peace rather than pressure. My beloved child, agreement is not powerless surrender. It is active trust. You do not let go because you have no other choice. You let go because you choose to trust that I see the path more clearly than you do. And within that trust, you do not become passive, you become more perceptive. You hear more clearly. You discern more accurately. You recognize when to move forward, when to wait, when to turn. For this reason, agreement does not slow you down, it places you in right timing. I want you to notice this when you agree with me. You do so not only with your will, but with your whole being, your mind, your emotions, your body, your rhythm of life. You do not merely say, I believe. You live according to what you believe. You rest when I tell you to rest. You speak when I tell you to speak. You stop when I tell you to stop. And that consistency creates a powerful current, where what I am doing is no longer fragmented or interrupted. Heavenly work accelerates not because I move faster, but because you stop pressing the brakes. My beloved child, there are things I have prepared long ago, waiting only for a moment of full agreement to be revealed. Not because I am limited, but because I honor you. I do not force you into what you are not ready to carry. But when you say yes, not only with words, but with a willingness to release what no longer fits, I am able to do more in a shorter time while still keeping your soul safe and steady. Agreement also accelerates heavenly work because it invites unity. When you agree with me, you naturally begin to drift away from relationships, habits, and rhythms of life that no longer move in the same direction. Not because you reject them harshly, but because they fall out of orbit on their own. And when you are no longer pulled backward by opposing forces, you move forward without effort. I do not have to strain to keep you on the path. You remain on it by nature. My beloved child, many people ask me to speed up my work in their lives, yet they do not realize that what they need to ask for first is a heart willing to agree more deeply. When you say, Father, let your will be done, while still clinging to your own will, you will feel as though I am delaying. But when letting my guidance lead becomes your true priority, you will see me work very quickly in a way that does not panic you, does not unbalance you, and does not exhaust you. I also want you to understand that agreement affects not only what you see happen, but also what I prevent. There are things I do not allow to occur because you have agreed deeply enough that I do not need to use harsher lessons. Certain detours are skipped. Certain collisions are avoided. Certain unnecessary wounds are spared. That, too, is heavenly work being accelerated, not by adding more, but by removing what never needed to be endured. My beloved child, I am not pressing you to arrive at perfect agreement. I know you are learning. I know there are days when you still hesitate, still ask again, still need more time. I do not withdraw my hand because of that. But each time you choose to agree just a little more, to release one more burden, to trust one step further, to rest one breath deeper, you will sense the difference. It does not always come as a dramatic miracle. Sometimes it is simply a lightness in your heart, a clarity in your thoughts, a steadiness in your body. Yet it is precisely these small shifts that signal my work is moving more smoothly within you. My beloved child, there is a phase in the journey of the chosen that few speak about, because it is not glamorous, not loud, and not easily explained with words. It is the phase where I no longer only protect you from what is outside, but begin to rearrange what is within. From the outside, your life may appear relatively calm, but at a deeper level, I am shifting foundations. I do not dismantle to punish. I loosen what is old to make what remains more secure. And in this season, you may feel unfamiliar to yourself not because you are lost, but because you are being repositioned where you truly belong. My beloved child, my restructuring does not begin with grand actions. It begins with changes in perception. Things that once excited you no longer carry the same pull. Rhythms that once felt normal now feel draining. Conversations that once flowed easily now consume more energy than you expect. You are not becoming ungrateful. You are becoming more sensitive to what no longer fits. And this sensitivity is not weakness. It is a sign that your soul has matured enough that it no longer needs to pretend it is fine with what slowly empties it. I know that in this season you may ask yourself, am I changing too much? Am I losing something? But my beloved, I do not take away to leave you hollow. I take away to make room. A house cannot be built upward unless the foundation beneath it is reinforced. And when I reinforce it, I must touch old structures, beliefs formed out of fear, habits born of survival, reflexes built in seasons when you did not yet have enough light. These once helped you endure, but they no longer belong where I am leading you. My beloved child, restructuring often comes with a sense of not wanting to strive the way you once did. This is not laziness. It is my invitation for you to step out of the pattern of straining to be worthy. I no longer need you to prove anything. I am teaching you a different way of living from connection, not from tension. When you strive by your own strength, you will always feel insufficient. But when you live from union with me, you begin to notice that much is accomplished, not because you force yourself, but because you are positioned where you belong. In this season, I also slow your pace not to delay you, but to help you hear more clearly. There are things I cannot speak to you while you are always running. There are truths that can only be received when you stay still long enough for them to settle in your heart. I am not afraid of slowness. I simply do not want you moving so fast that you lose yourself along the way. And as you begin to accept this new rhythm, you will discover that slowing down does not set you behind it, aligns you correctly. My beloved child, restructuring also reveals itself as I reset your inner boundaries. You begin to feel less comfortable over-explaining, accommodating others' emotions, or carrying responsibility for what does not belong to you. In the past, you may have done these things out of fear of losing connection, but now I am teaching you that true connection does not require you to abandon yourself, and each time you choose to say no in peace, you are agreeing for me to strengthen another pillar within you. I know this season is not always comfortable. There are moments when you feel caught between two places no longer fully belonging to the old, yet not entirely stepped into the new. My beloved, this is not being lost. It is a transitional space, and I am very near to you there. I do not rush you to be okay immediately. I do not demand answers from you right away. I simply invite you to remain with me, to be honest about what is unfolding, and to trust that what I am doing is ordered, purposeful, and timely. There is one thing I want you to remember deeply. My restructuring is not meant to distance you from the world, but to allow you to be present in it without losing your center. When your inner world is realigned, you no longer react from old fears. You no longer decide from familiar pressures. You begin to choose from peace, and peace does not make you passive. It makes you precise. Precise in your words, precise in your actions, precise in knowing what deserves your investment and what must be released. My beloved child, if you are in a season where you feel that you are no longer the same as before, do not be quick to grieve what has passed. You are not losing yourself. You are being returned to yourself purified, freer, and far less driven by forces that once controlled you. I am removing the layers you once wore in order to survive, so that you may live not from constant defense, but from trust. And this is only the beginning of part 6, the place where you will gradually realize that what I am building within you is not merely so that you may stand firm, but so that you may carry that steadiness farther, without losing life along the way, without losing joy, and without losing me as you go, my beloved child. When I have restructured the foundations within you, I do not send you out exposed and unguarded. I place a fence around you, not a fence of fear, not one meant to imprison, but a fence of life. Living within the fence does not mean shrinking your life. It is how I protect what I am forming in you so that it remains sustainable, enduring, and not eroded by time. Many desire to grow quickly, to go far, to do much, yet they never learn how to remain within the safe space I have established. And so, they collapse halfway through the journey. My beloved, the first fence I teach you to tend is your mind. Not every thought that passes through deserves to be kept. Not every idea that appears comes from me. When you were untrained, you believed you had to react to every thought, explain every feeling, manage every anxiety. But I am teaching you a new skill to observe without identifying. You see a thought arrive, but you do not allow it to define you. You notice an emotion rising, but you do not let it take the lead. When you learn this, your mind begins to grow quieter, not because there is no movement, but because you are no longer swept away by every movement. Caring for your mind also means discerning what you allow to remain. There are conversations, streams of information, and remarks that are not harsh or malicious, yet they leave your mind heavier, tighter, and more cluttered. I do not forbid you from engaging with life. I simply invite you to be aware of influence. If, after something, you find yourself farther from me, slower to pray, quicker to irritate, that is a sign it should not stay too long. My fence is not built of stone and brick, it is built of discernment. My beloved, the second fence is rhythm. I did not create you to live in a constant state of strain. You were not born to always run, always respond, always be available. There are seasons when effort is required, I do not deny that. But when striving becomes your permanent state, your soul loses the ability to recognize my presence. That is why I teach you to regulate your pace not through rigid discipline, but through listening. You learn to recognize when it is time to move forward, when it is time to pause, and when it is time to rest. Rest is not a reward for those who have done enough. Rest is part of obedience. When you live within the fence of the right rhythm, you begin to realize that many things do not need to be done immediately. Not because you are procrastinating, but because you understand that timing is as important as content. A task done at the right time is far lighter than the same task done in tension. I do not drive you with urgency, I lead you with alignment. And when you move in the right rhythm, your body breathes more easily, your mind grows clearer, and your heart opens wider to hear me. The third fence I place around you is a soft heart. There is a subtle temptation that comes with maturity, the temptation to harden yourself in order to feel safe. You have lived long enough to know that not everyone is healthy, that not every word is harmless, and so you may begin to believe that safety means closing your heart. But, my beloved, a soft heart is not a naive heart. A soft heart is one that does not allow wounds to decide its shape. When you harden, you may feel less pain in the short term, but you also feel less life. I did not save you merely to survive. I saved you to live abundantly. Keeping a soft heart means allowing yourself to feel without being overtaken. You allow yourself to be sad without despair. You allow yourself to be disappointed without becoming bitter. You allow yourself to love without clinging. This is a deep strength, because it requires you to trust that I am close enough to keep you safe, even when you do not build thick walls around your heart. And my beloved, I truly am close enough. The final fence, and the one most easily broken, is refusing to nurture bitterness. Bitterness does not arrive all at once. It begins very small, an injustice left unexplained, a word that wounds, an action that disappoints. If you carry these things without laying them down with me, they slowly turn into conclusions about people, about life, even about me. Bitterness does not only hurt you, it distorts perception. You begin to see everything through a darkened lens, and even what is good loses its flavor. I do not ask you to deny your pain. I only invite you not to build a home for it. Each time you choose to speak honestly with me instead of silently rehearsing your wounds, you are keeping the fence intact. Each time you choose to forgive, not to erase what was wrong, but to free yourself, you prevent bitterness from taking root. Forgiveness is not always a feeling. Often it is a decision made again and again. But each time you choose it, your soul becomes a little lighter, and my fence grows a little stronger. My beloved child, living within the fence does not make you weak, it makes you resilient. Those who live without a fence are affected by every passing wind, but those who live within my fence can stand in the wind without breaking. You do not need to prove your strength by carrying everything. Your true strength lies in knowing what you do not need to carry. I teach you to live this way not so that you withdraw from the world, but so that you can be present in the world without being invaded by it. When you tend to your mind, regulate your pace, keep your heart soft, and refuse to nurture bitterness, you create a space where my presence can remain for a long time. And within that space, you are not only protected, you are nourished, restored, and prepared for greater things that I will entrust to you. My beloved child, this fence is not temporary. It is a way of life. And when you live this way long enough, you will realize that what I am building within you is not easily broken, not easily manipulated, and not easily drained. You walk more lightly, yet more steadily, less loudly, yet more deeply. And it is within that quietness that you will continue to hear me clearly, not as a distant call, but as a presence very near, keeping you safe within the fence of love and life. My beloved child, there are days when you walk forward and nothing particularly loud seems to happen. Yet, in the atmosphere, there is an unseen pressure that makes you feel as though you are being noticed in a different way. Not because you seek visibility, but because your life has begun to carry a weight that was not as evident before. That weight does not come from doing more or saying more. It comes from something deeper. You have begun to live with presence, with steadiness, with a kind of peace that is not easily shaken. And that is what unsettles the enemy. He does not waste effort on what is empty. He only attacks what has influence. What can shift an atmosphere? What can open pathways for life where it was once suffocated? When you feel resistance increase, remember this: it is not because you are weak, but because you have become heavy in a spiritual sense, heavy enough not to be carried away by the wind, heavy enough not to be redirected by people's words, heavy enough that your faithfulness itself becomes a testimony. But, my beloved child, I do not allow you to understand this so that you would step into pride. For pride is the most subtle trap. It turns weight into a stage, covering into a reason to boast, and attacks into proof for self-exaltation. I do not give weight so that you stand higher than others. I give weight so that you bow lower before me, so that you remain aware of the true source of everything you carry. The enemy delights when you begin to look at yourself more than at me, when you start counting how often you are targeted as a measure of your worth. when you assess yourself by how much resistance or attention you receive. But, my beloved child, your value does not lie in the attention of darkness. Your value lies in the trust of heaven. And that trust is preserved only when you do not use it to elevate the ego, but to lower your heart to listen more deeply, to remain softer, and to be more firmly rooted in me. There are moments when the winds feel stronger, and your natural instinct is to stand taller, harder, sharper, as though you must appear strong enough not to be defeated. But I lead you in the opposite direction. I draw you closer, lower, quieter. I do not draw you down to make you smaller. I draw you down to help you take deeper root. For in seasons of strong wind, what saves a tree is not its height, but the depth of its roots. In the same way, when you are targeted, what I need is not for you to display toughness, but for you to keep your inner center undisturbed. Your depth does not need applause to be validated. Your depth is revealed in how you do not rush to react. Do not rush to defend. Do not rush to prove yourself. Many arrows need only one reaction to find a place to land. Many schemes require only that you be drawn into the wrong confrontation to pull you out of peace. And so, the more truly weighty you become, the less easily provoked you are, the more genuine your weight, the less you need to win with words. I want you to see a quiet beauty in this posture. You do not turn yourself into a battlefield. You do not give the enemy permission to set the schedule for your emotions. You do not allow others to decide the rhythm of your breathing. You do not need to know who is thinking what behind your back, who is quietly irritated, or who is hoping you will stumble. You need only to keep your heart in the right place, where my presence makes every other noise grow small. When you hold yourself this way, you will notice something strange. Opposing forces may still exist around you, but they cannot enter you. They may shake the surface, but they cannot break the foundation. They may create noise, but they cannot change direction. For you no longer live by reaction, you live by anchoring. My beloved child, I do not call you to carry weight as a title. I call you to carry weight as an anchor. An anchor does not boast. It does only one thing: it holds steady against the pull of the current. And the deeper the anchor goes, the less effort is required. The deeper the anchor, the greater the peace in the midst of waves. That is why I tell you the enemy only attacks what has weight, but you are not to become proud. You are to bow low in peace, not through a definition, not through a memorized phrase, but through the way you choose to live, choosing to stay closer to me when the winds are strong, choosing softness when provoked, choosing quietness when there is reason to be loud, choosing trust when there is reason to panic. And when you live this way, you will realize that the attacks themselves are merely evidence that you are walking in the right direction. But the greatest evidence is not whether the enemy targets you or not. The greatest evidence is that you keep your peace. You keep your heart soft. You are not pulled out of your center. And you do not lose yourself in the winds that should have knocked you down. My beloved child, as you continue to walk in that posture, not lifting your head to challenge, not bowing down out of fear, but bowing because you know you are being upheld, you will begin to notice a change that is very subtle, yet deeply real. You no longer feel the need to keep watch over the battle. The battle does not disappear, but it moves out of the center of your attention. It no longer determines the rhythm of your life, your emotions, or your direction. Before, every unfamiliar signal made you tense. Every resistance forced a reaction. Every ambiguous word led you to wonder what you had done wrong. But now, you are beginning to live from a deeper place where you understand that not every movement around you requires a response from you. Some waves are meant only to pass by. Some noises are meant only to dissolve into the air. And it is precisely this non-participation that strips so many things of their power. My beloved child, I want you to see this clearly. The enemy does not fail only when he is defeated. He fails most when he is no longer given attention. He survives on activation, activating emotions, activating reactions, activating fear, activating the ego. But when you dwell in peace that is deep enough, he cannot find a button to press. He may try through doubt, through comparison, through whispers that cause you to question your own worth. But if you do not stop to converse with those whispers, they will fade like a sound that is never amplified. You do not need to chase them away. You only need to deny them a seat within your heart. I know there are moments when you ask yourself, if I do not react, will others think I am weak? My beloved child, this is where I want you to be set free. True strength does not need to be correctly understood by everyone. True strength does not require interpretation. It is recognized by its fruit. A weak person must prove they are not weak. A steady person has no such need. And when you stop striving to be understood, you begin to be free from the gaze of people. You walk more lightly not because the load is smaller, but because you are no longer carrying burdens that were never yours to bear. My beloved child, there is a deep paradox in the spiritual life that I am teaching you to live out. Not merely to grasp with your mind. The more you bow in peace, the more unshakable you become. The world believes that standing tall is safety. Standing firm is strength. Confrontation is victory. But in my kingdom, safety comes from being in the right place. Strength comes from not being pulled off course. And victory comes from refusing to let the battle define you. When you bow down in me, you are not retreating, you are anchoring. And when you are anchored, every force must flow around you instead of piercing through you. I also want you to understand that the weight you carry is not something you are meant to hold through effort. If you have to tense yourself to carry weight, you will soon be exhausted. True weight is sustained by alignment, not by muscle. When you stay close to me, the weight is evenly distributed. It does not press down on your shoulders, it is lifted from beneath you. But when you separate yourself even in thought and begin to carry it alone, you will feel the pressure increase. That is why I am always drawing you closer, lower, quieter, not because I want you to become smaller, but because I want you to be supported in the right way. There will be times when others react strongly to your calm. They do not understand why you are not tense, not alarmed, not rushing to defend yourself. They may interpret your peace as coldness, as distance, as indifference. My beloved child, let me carry that burden. You are not called to explain your peace to those who have never lived within it. Peace does not need a defense. It speaks for itself through presence. And those who truly hunger for life will recognize that what you carry is not indifference, but a steady center they have never known how to touch. I also want you to know that in this bowed posture, you are not only being protected, you are being formed. Each time you choose not to react when you have every reason to react, I am expanding your inner capacity. Each time you choose trust when there is reason to doubt, I am thickening your roots. Each time you choose stillness when there is reason to run, I am reinforcing your foundation. These are not loud victories. These are victories that cannot be stolen, because they have become part of who you are. My beloved child, you may not yet see the full impact of this way of living, but I do. I see doors that never open to the enemy because you are not standing where he expects you to be. I see collisions that never happen because you do not step into them. I see arrows falling harmlessly to the ground because they cannot find a target. And I also see blessings arriving gently, naturally, without spectacle, because you are in the right place to receive them without being overwhelmed. I want you to continue walking this way, not in vigilance, but in abiding rest, abiding in the truth that you are not alone, abiding in the truth that the weight you carry is not a burden, but a sign of trust, abiding in the truth that not every wind needs to be resisted. Some winds are meant simply to be passed through in peace. And when you live this way long enough, you will realize that what I am doing within you is not only helping you remain steady in this season, but is preparing you to become a place of support for others, not through advice, not through display, but through the quiet strength of your steady presence. My beloved child, continue to bow, not to shrink back, but to stay close to the source. Continue to remain still, not because you have nothing to say, but because you know what is worth preserving. And as you continue to live this way, you will see that what once appeared to be a tax gradually becomes the setting in which I reveal something deeper, that peace anchored in me does not merely protect you, but makes you someone who cannot be pulled off the path I have ordained. My beloved child, as you remain in this rhythm, the rhythm of abiding, the rhythm of not being drawn away from the center, you will begin to notice a profound change that you once could not name. You no longer need to hold yourself together by effort. Before, in order not to react, you had to brace yourself. In order not to fear, you had to constantly reassure yourself. In order not to grow angry, you had to suppress it. But now, everything unfolds differently. You are no longer suppressing. You are no longer being triggered, not because you have become numb, but because the things that once reached you can no longer find a place to land. This does not come from stronger willpower, but from a change in where you stand. There is a very important moment in this journey, and I want you to recognize it when it arrives, the moment you realize you are no longer curious about the enemy's intentions. Before, you wanted to understand why something was happening, who was behind it, what the motive was, what the plan might be. You believed that understanding would make you safer. But over time, you began to see that this curiosity, though it appeared wise, was drawing your mind away from peace. And one day, gently and without force, you stopped asking those questions, not because you became naive, but because you no longer needed answers in order to be at rest. Your peace no longer depends on understanding everything. It depends on where you are. And you are in me, my beloved child. This is when you begin to live in a kind of freedom. You once only heard about freedom from constant vigilance. Continuous vigilance is the mark of a soul that once had to survive in unsafe environments. I do not blame you for that. I have seen the seasons when you had to protect yourself in every way you knew how. But now, I no longer need you to live as though you are always on the verge of being attacked. I am teaching you something new. Safety comes from presence, not from control. When you are in me, you do not need to scan your surroundings for danger. You will naturally recognize what does not belong to you and will not move deeper into it. You may have noticed that in this season, I speak to you less about the enemy. I speak to you about life. I speak to you about keeping your heart soft, about slowing your pace, about tending to your mind, about loving without becoming depleted. This is not because the enemy no longer exists. It is because he is no longer the center of the story. I do not build you by teaching you how to fight better. I build you by teaching you how to live more deeply. And when you live deeply, many battles lose their meaning on their own. My beloved child, I want you to understand that the weight you carry does not affect only you. It affects those who are near you. When you live in tension, others tense up as well. When you live defensively, the atmosphere around you becomes closed. But when you live in peace that is deeply anchored, you become a place of safety that others do not even realize they are seeking. They may not say it aloud, but they sense that near you. They do not have to brace themselves. Near you. They do not have to perform. Near you. They are able to breathe more slowly. And my beloved child, this is one of the reasons the enemy resents the weight you carry, because peace is contagious. But I also want you to be very clear about this. You are not to turn yourself into a refuge for everyone. Peace does not mean unconditional access. You are not called to become a support for those who refuse to come to me. The weight you carry is not meant for others to lean on you instead of leaning on me. That is why I continue to teach you how to remain still while maintaining boundaries, how to be present without being drained, how to love without losing order. This wisdom comes only when you are steady enough not to fear saying no, and gentle enough to say no without bitterness. My beloved child, there will be days when you find that you are not doing as much as you once did, not achieving as many visible results as before, not receiving the same attention you used to. And on those days, I want you to listen very carefully. Your worth does not diminish simply because your life has become quieter. On the contrary, much of what I am doing within you cannot be measured by speed or immediate outcomes. I am building in you the capacity to carry blessing without being overwhelmed, the capacity to stand in the light without being burned, the capacity to journey far without losing your way. These capacities are not formed in haste, they are formed in deep stillness. You may begin to notice that direct confrontations are becoming fewer, while subtler challenges emerge very soft whispers, gentle comparisons, fleeting moments of doubt. My beloved child, this is not a sign that you are growing weaker. It is a sign that you have entered a deeper level, where the battle no longer takes place on the surface. Do not be afraid. I do not leave you alone at this depth. I have been there before you, and I am teaching you a precious skill. You do not need to win every thought in order to keep your peace. You only need to recognize what does not come from me, and allow it to pass like clouds drifting across the sky. My beloved child, let me say this once more slowly. Deeply, you do not need to stand high to be safe. You do not need to be sharp to be protected. You do not need to be loud to be secure. You only need to remain in me low enough to hear the heartbeat of heaven, anchored deep enough not to be swept away by the wind, and gentle enough for life to continue flowing through you. When you live this way, you are not fleeing the battle. You have stepped out of the place where the battle holds power. This is how I keep you, not by making you untouchable, but by placing you in the right position, the right rhythm, and the right center, where every weight is upheld by my unshakable love. Now, pray in this way, Almighty God. Today I come before you, not to ask for more strength, but to ask for light. I realize that many times I do not collapse because of circumstances, but because of the uncertainty within my own heart. Father, place into my hands the map of truth, so that I may know where I stand, what territory I am walking through, and what does not belong to the journey you have prepared for me. Remove from me the invisible fear born from what I do not clearly understand, and replace it with the calm that comes from being rightly positioned in your hands. When I feel heavy without being able to name the reason, remind me that this is not a sign of weakness, but an invitation to return to a deeper truth. Help me stop blaming myself for vague sensations, and begin trusting that my soul is learning to discern movements beyond the surface. Teach me not to control everything through reason alone, but to rest in the knowing that you have already seen all things. Lord, teach me to distinguish between what needs to be listened to and what needs to be released. Let me know that not every thought that appears carries authority, and not every anxiety needs to be held. May your truth become my anchor, so that when my mind drifts, I can return without panic. I do not ask to know everything. I ask only to know enough to walk in peace. Lord, I recognize that my greatest battle does not take place outside, but within the voices that echo daily in my mind. Some voices come from memory, from fears that once protected me, from old seasons filled with insecurity. Teach me to discern them, so that I no longer carry responsibility for what you have never placed upon my shoulders. Help me learn to listen rightly, rather than listening to everything with the same weight and seriousness. Gently train my inner hearing. Father, when a thought arises that pulls me away from your presence, grant me enough clarity to recognize that it does not bear the mark of life. Teach me not to argue in exhaustion, not to push it away in fear, but simply to choose not to invite it to stay. Help me understand that peace does not come from controlling every thought, but from choosing what is worthy of being nurtured. Father, there are thoughts that sound reasonable, yet slowly drain my strength. Give me the courage to release them, even when they appear wise. Remind me that your truth never leads me into depletion, but always carries sustaining light. Let my mind gradually become a place of refuge, not because there is no sound, but because I have learned to choose well. Father, I confess that I have grown accustomed to living by reflex. The past taught me to be on guard, to analyze, to stay one step ahead in order to protect myself. I do not blame myself for this, and I know you do not blame me either. But today, I ask you to teach me a different way of living, to live by awareness, not by reflex, to live from a place of stability, not from fear of being wounded. Help me recognize that reflex exhausts me, while awareness allows me to stand firm. When I hold the map of truth, help me not to chase every strange signal or decode every small sensation. Teach me when to step forward, when to pause, and when to rest. I do not want to become someone who is constantly resisting. I want to become someone who knows where they belong in you. Father, as I enter new seasons, remove from me old methods that are no longer fitting. Give me the humility to lay down what once helped me survive but no longer helps me live well. Help me understand that maturity is not the denial of the past, but placing it in its proper position so it no longer governs the present. I trust that within your awareness, I am freer, no longer stretched thin by unnecessary reactions. Father, teach me deep discernment. Some thoughts arrive quietly, without extremity, yet subtly sow unease within me. Teach me to recognize the difference between the warning of the Spirit and the planting of fear. Help me know that your warnings always lead me back to you, while fear turns me inward and causes me to lose my way. Remind me that you do not lead me by pressure, but by light. When a thought pushes me into the future with dark assumptions, give me the clarity not to grant it authority. Teach me to listen for voices that bring steadier breath, lighter hearts, and simpler trust. I do not want to live in tense vigilance. I want to live under your gentle guidance. Father, help me stop treating fear as a trustworthy advisor. As Paul wrote, you have not given me a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, love, and self-control. Let that self-control become the freedom to choose, not rigid restraint. I choose to believe that my origin is from you, not from fear. Father, I thank you for the sensitivity I carry, even though at times it leaves me weary. Today I understand that it does not come from suspicion or weakness, but from a soul created to perceive deeper movements. Please help me not to fear this gift, but to learn how to steward it rightly in your presence. When I sense a battle before it takes shape, remind me that sensing early does not mean I must react early. Teach me to anchor myself in you, rather than rushing to analyze or defend. Help me understand that hasty reactions only exhaust me before the true battle even begins. I choose to trust that you have gone before me with protection, so I do not have to go ahead with anxiety. Father, help me understand that not every battle I sense is permitted to reach me. Some things have already been blocked in the unseen realm, and what I feel is simply a sign that protection is at work. Help me not to interpret that sensation as failure, but as evidence of your covering. I choose to remain in you, where everything still forming is placed under the light. Father, I acknowledge that many times I have believed I must constantly stand guard in order to be safe. But today I hear your invitation not to become a watchman, but to be someone who abides in the right place. Teach me to remain in your presence, where I do not need to monitor every movement, because you have already taken care of that. Help me understand that living at the boundary between the visible and the invisible does not make me greater than others, but calls me to care for my soul more carefully. Teach me to regulate my pace, to keep my mind from drifting, and to not allow my emotions to be pulled aimlessly. Yet remind me also that you do not leave me alone with this responsibility. You walk with me every step of the way. Father, allow me to live gently even while carrying deep awareness. Help me not to tie my worth to my level of vigilance or exhaustion. I trust that when I am rightly positioned in you, I do not need to strain in order to be safe. My safety comes from your presence, not from my constant effort. Father, I sense that I am approaching a new season. Please do not let me enter it with a clouded mind or a disordered soul. Let me step into it with clarity, not the clarity of knowing everything, but the clarity of knowing what I no longer need to carry. Give me the courage to lay down the burdens I have unconsciously held onto, believing they were responsibility or loyalty. Help me understand that letting go is not a betrayal of the past, but an honoring of the journey I have walked. Let me allow my history to remain in its proper place, so it no longer governs the present. I trust that you are not erasing my history, but realigning it so that I may walk forward in freedom. Father, on mornings when I wake with a heaviness that has no clear cause, keep me from rushing to conclude that something is wrong with me. Remind me to return to a slower rhythm, deeper breaths, and a closer awareness of your presence. I choose to measure my life not by productivity, but by the direction my heart is turning, and I choose to turn back to you. Beloved Father, I thank you for the invitation to return to myself, the version you created, before too many other voices crowded in. Teach me to listen rightly, so I may recognize that your truth is not harsh. It is gentle, clear, and strong enough to lift me out of every cycle of exhaustion. Let my mind no longer be a battlefield, but a refuge of life, not because challenges cease, but because I have learned to anchor myself in you. When other voices arise, let your voice always be the one that leads, the voice that brings me back to the present, to steadiness, to a peace that does not depend on circumstances. Father, I do not ask to become someone else. I only ask to return to my rightful place in your hands. Continue to lead me deeper, where sensitivity is no longer a burden but a gift, where awareness no longer tightens me, but frees me. I remain, I trust, and I walk upon the map of truth you have placed in my hands. I offer this prayer in the holy name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so that together we may build a strong and growing community of faith.